You ever have one of those moments where you realize your life has just swerved off the rails and landed straight in a true crime documentary? That's what it felt like the day I pulled into my brand new driveway still, riding high after dropping nearly $300. 000 on a house my wife and I had been dreaming about for years and found myself nose to nose with a woman I'd never met, screaming at me like I'd just stolen her life's work. "You can't live here," she shrieked, right in my face, standing on my concrete, insisting my home belonged to her, to some HOA that, as far as every legal document I'd ever signed was concerned, didn't even exist. But here's where things took a turn from weird to nightmare fuel. This Lady Valerie Shaw, as I'd soon learned, started rattling off details about my life that made the hair on my neck stand up. She knew my work scheduled down to the minute, knew when my wife, Lena, left for her night shift, even knew the coffee shop she hit on her way home. If you're listening to this and your skin's crawling, drop a comment, because mine sure as hell was. Let me back up. That Tuesday morning in June was supposed to be the beginning of a new chapter. I'm a project manager at Morrison Construction, 8 years strong. Lena's a nurse who's made more sacrifices than I can count. We'd scrimped and saved for this colonial on Maple Street in Willow Creek. 3 beds, 2 baths, a monster oak tree in the yard. It was finally ours, after the kind of endless closing process that has you checking paperwork in your sleep. So there I was, carrying the last box from our Honda, and this woman with a perfectly stiff blonde bob and country club outfit marched straight up my driveway like she'd lived there since Nixon was in office. "Excuse me," she snapped, voice sharp as glass. "You can't live here. This house belongs to HA property." For a second, I thought maybe I'd slipped into an alternate universe. I tried to explain, calm and rational, that my paperwork was ironclad no HOA. But Valerie just smiled, ice cold, and started laying out details from my life with this smugness that made my fists clench. She talked about my work, Lena's shifts, even tracked how many times we'd visited the property during the closing. Then she gestured toward my Honda. "That blue Honda's been parked here 3 times in the past month. I have documentation of all activities around this property." When she said documentation, I could feel something in my chest seize up. That's when her so-called cavalry Ayurveda nervous guy named Greg, with 2 clipboard-carrying women at his sides, trying to look official. Greg, who I'd later learned was her husband and, spoiler alert, a whole lot more involved than he let on, mumbled about property monitoring while sweating through his polo shirt. Valerie produced a shifty-looking boundary survey and even claimed she'd already complained to Morrison Construction about my behavior. And right on cue, my phone buzzed with an email from my boss about neighborhood complaints. That's when I realized this woman wasn't just watching us. She was trying to sabotage Mimi's job, my home, my life. I told them to leave, that I'd be calling my attorney. Valerie just laughed and said, "Newcomers always learn the rules." As they walked away, Greg kept glancing back with this haunted look that told me he wasn't as on board with Valerie's crusade as he pretended. That night, as I brought in the mail, I spotted something that made my stomach flipe. A security camera strapped to the oak tree, aimed right at my door. There was no way that thing had been there before. That tree was supposed to be where I'd hang a swing for my future kids. Now it was watching me, and I realized I hadn't moved into a dream. Home I'd stepped onto a battlefield. And if you think it stops there, buckle up. 3 days later, heading home from the hardware store, I saw a massive moving truck blocking my garage. There was Valerie, directing movers as they hauled her furniture toward my front door. It was so insane, I actually wondered if I'd pulled onto the wrong street. But no, this was my house, and this woman was trying to move in. She waved a folder of official documents and loudly proclaimed that the house belonged to her late mother-in-law's estate, which she claimed to have inherited. The movers looked at me, completely confused, until I stood in the doorway and made it clear Valerie was trespassing with fake papers. Of course, She called the cops on me. The irony was rich. The police arrived, looked over both our paperwork, and told her if she had a problem, she could take it to court. Her meltdown was legendary. She accused everyone of theft, corruption, and ran through every excuse in the book while the neighbors watched, some probably believing her. When everyone finally left, I found a spare key in the mailbox that definitely wasn't mine. Valerie had probably copied it during the house showings, meaning she'd been plotting this for months. The next morning, Robert Miller, my retired accountant neighbor, showed up with a manila envelope and a face that meant trouble. He'd been watching Valerie, and what he dug up was wild photos of Greg at a coffee shop forging signatures, bank records showing payments to a document prep service, and text messages between Greg and Valerie planning their inheritance recovery. Turns out Greg was more than a nervous bystander, owed thousands in gambling debt, and had been forging legal documents for months, roping in neighbors as fake witnesses with the promise of a cut when they won the house. It didn't stop at fake deeds. Valerie had been recording every conversation, editing audio to make it sound like I was threatening them. Their plan was to frame me for fraud and extortion if things went sideways. If not for Robert, they might have pulled it off. That's when the tide turned. With help from my lawyer, Aaron, we exposed Valerie and Greg at a neighborhood meeting, photos, bank records, fake documents, the works. The judge saw through their act, dismissed the restraining order against me, and slapped a temporary one on Valerie. The community rallied around us, finally seeing the truth. But Valerie wasn't done. She tried to change my locks with a locksmith, filed fraudulent tax appeals on homes across the county, ran a contractor kickback, schemer web of fraud went back years and affected dozens of families. Greg, desperate and betrayed, finally confessed everything, and investigators uncovered a criminal network involving corrupt officials, forged tax claims, and property scams spanning multiple counties. The fallout was massive. Valerie, Greg, crooked inspectors, and even her lawyer went down. The news blew up. Property values rebounded, and our neighborhood became a model for transparency and honesty. Morrison Construction promoted me. Lena's career recovered, and Greg turned his life around in recovery. Looking back now, it still blows my mind how a simple home purchase dropped us into the middle of a criminal conspiracy. But if there's one thing I learned, it's that standing up to fraud and intimidation matters. Good people working together can expose the worst criminals hiding in plain sight. If this story hit home, smash that like button. Share your own experiences in the comments. And remember, never let anyone steal your peace. Thanks for watching Echo Stories. See you in the next one.